question regarding perhaps like how much did your SAT score or how much value did that add to your application?
Yeah, I think it adds immense value. Like I mentioned in the presentation, so I scored 1500 plus 1540 specifically. I think, again, the difference between a 1560 and a 1540 or a 1520 and a 1540 may not make a huge difference. But in my opinion, crossing the 1500 plus for an SAT, at least from an Ivy League standpoint, is going to be important. And again, I would reiterate that I personally think it's a very important component of your application because schools are different, right? Depending on the school you go to, academics may be competitive, less competitive. The SAT is a really standardized way to evaluate a student's performance. So in my opinion, especially as an international student, it's important to provide those details, but also secondly, ensure that you have a score that's worth providing. So I would recommend that if you can, make sure you hit 50 plus and make sure you include it.
Diya, I have a very important question to ask you. Most of the times when we are applying as counselors, sometimes it's very difficult to explain to a child whether he should go for a college or for a course. For example, you're also aware that, your college, your varsity, for instance, has a higher acceptance rate for certain subjects. One, how easy is it to transfer? Do you recommend this as a technique? If I'm getting through Barnard, say in gender, diversity, equity, vis-a-vis, I may get into any other school with a computer science major and I'm looking at doing CS. What should be my approach be? As a counselor, we make it depends upon, to us, we just want the child to be happy and settled. But, each child has his goals. So we don't have a straight answer to it. So I'm just asking for you so that, a lot of students have this in mind and they would want this question also to be answered, basically.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And as you did mention, some subjects are a bit more competitive than others. That being said, just for the benefit of everyone on this call, you actually don't declare your major when you get into a US university. So unlike Indian universities where there are different streams and it's kind of predetermined where you're going, most colleges, expect that you would only declare your major during the second year of college. So, well, I will say that, applying to different colleges or subsections of a college, it may be easier to get in from one place or another. It's, again, they're not admitting people based on streams. So I would say that, it's a bit different. So if you're applying for computer science and gender studies, two things they're going to check. Firstly, if all of your activities are computer science related or technology related, and if your essays are technology related, they're smart, they've been in this business for a long time, they're going to know that you're going towards computer science. And secondly, at least from what I've heard in my own experience, given that they expect for you to be changing majors, I do think that what really plays a larger role is your application quality as a whole. The major you're intending to apply to is not as important. So I will say there needs to be cohesion between the major that you're planning on applying for in your activities. If there's a disjoint message there, that's automatically a red flag for the admissions officer that you're trying to game the system. And secondly, given that you declare your major in second year, so many of my friends went in thinking they'd do one thing and then came out doing something else. So that's not abnormal, but just something to consider that it doesn't play as large of a role.
Thank you so much, Diya. I will leave.
Yeah, hi Diya. Firstly, thank you so much for the great information. How do we guide the children to decide to give preference to the course or to the college? That's I think the major a lot of parents are facing. Maybe somebody has got through Damat but UCL, but the course is in the the UCLA. But Damat has a more value, or NYU or something like that. So according to you, how should that be guided? What is the basic pathway has to go about it?
Yeah, so I think it does fall down to personal preferences. I can give you the approach that I took. My goal was to get into the best college possible. And the reasoning for that was because I knew that when you get into a good college, all of the courses are equally good. But secondly, when you're in a US college, you interact with people outside of your major too. So ensuring that you're surrounded by a caliber of really good students is really critical in my opinion. So my advice would be, especially because courses can change. I'll give you an example. One of my friends went in thinking she was dead set on doing economics and then came out of the University of Pennsylvania with a major in computer science. I think that's very, very typical in US colleges, because you don't officially declare your major, right, before you go in. You declare your major second year. So for me, it's the same thing happened with me. I initially went in thinking I was going to do something more on the poli-sci economics route. And then I found out that I was really passionate about technology, because that was a way for me to actually build out real world solutions. So my focus was going to the best school possible. So regardless of what course I did, I knew that, I'd have the best resources possible. So that's the approach that I took. I do know other students who were very clear that they wanted to do a specific subject. So they targeted more, universities that were very good for that specific course. But I think for me, I'd recommend just trying to target the best school possible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, firstly, thank you so much for taking out the time and to make this wonderful presentation. So you mentioned that you were a part of the admissions committee, right?
Not part of the admissions committee. Just wanted to clarify that. Students can't be part of the admissions committee. We do have a student ambassador program. It's called Kite and Key. So we're the students who actually show prospective parents around and students around campus. And we sort of are the face of the university, if that makes sense. Through that, we do often interact with the admissions counselors, given that a big part of our job is representing the university. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was talking about. So committees like these, different colleges, some have student advisory committees, where you're kind of the bridge between the actual faculty and the students. How important is it to be a part of these committees, and how much does it add to your college experience and what you're going to be doing after that?
Yeah, so this kind of gets into a question more about the actual college experiences. I think for me, this was really important for a few different reasons. The first is that you actually get to interact with very senior people at the university, right? So I was meeting with the president of the university on a weekly basis. I was meeting with the admissions office counselors on a daily basis. And then I also got to meet some amazing people, right? So, for example, as I was going on these tours of campuses, you often will meet Penn alumni who come with their children to tour the campus. So one of my first internships I actually got because I'd given a tour of the campus to a group, one of whom was, a Penn alum, and he liked me so much that, he reached out, he gave me the opportunity to intern at his firm. So it gives you a lot of exposure to the fantastic alumni networks that you meet, right? Or even now, if I go back to the University of Pennsylvania, because I interacted with so many professors or I interacted with the admissions office, when I go back now, there are a lot of people who are really advocating for me, connecting me to really amazing and important people to meet with from a career standpoint and really just enhancing my experience. So I think it's all about networking, right? That's why you try to get into the best school possible. You get to meet with fantastic people. So I would definitely recommend. I think I really enjoyed being a part of the student advisory committee because it was a fantastic experience, but it also has provided me the opportunity to meet amazing alumni and representatives. So I definitely recommend it.
Question.
Yep.
You went from GD Goenka to US, and I'm sure you have friends who went from GD Goenka to schools in UK, and other geographies, or did their graduation from India itself. And there is been a huge shift in the socio-political economics in the US currently. What would you advise in that regard? Your friends who've gone to UK versus who came to US and others who came to US. What is the advantage of studying in US? How does US give you an edge over everywhere else?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of different things. I think first and foremost would be that the way that US universities are set up, the admissions process, but also the subjects you study are very holistic. So for example, for me, I did major in two very technical subjects, computer science and cognitive science, which is basically their major in AI. I also took courses across the university. So for example, even in my own job, I took user experience or UX classes at Penn along with computer science, or I took consumer psychology classes. And I think all of those classes really came together to be able to give me, a very holistic view of how to tackle my job. So I think that was something that was really important to me. And secondly, regarding the socioeconomic, situation in the US, regardless of, a lot of the troubles that are going on right now, I think even now, US universities are perhaps one of the most inquisitive and open places that I've been to. So there is a huge focus, and this is something I notice, especially in American universities compared to my friends, on creating an environment where people are allowed to question things, where a university will stand by their kids, and also really putting them in an environment where they are encouraged to not just excel well in classes, right? There is really a holistic focus on what you're doing outside of those classes. There's a focus on advocating as part of student government and really getting a holistic experience. And then last but not least, I may be a bit biased here, but I think in terms of alumni networks, based on my own experience and my friends, I think the alumni networks at these colleges in the US are really loyal. So there have been times that I've reached out to a random person on LinkedIn who's also gone to UPenn. And as soon as I mention that I'm from UPenn, their face lights up. Let's get coffee, let's catch up. So I think that the alumni networks, and that attachment in US colleges is definitely more. And then last but not least, what I'm just going to quickly comment on the socio-political situation in the US is, at the end of the day, most of these universities always will release a strong statement of support for their international students. There is a commitment to the diversity that they bring to colleges. And even now, I think if you read the latest press statements from universities in the news right now, there's a strong commitment to international students. And in my own experience, they're very, very welcome on campuses, and they really add to the vibrancy. And then, getting away from the emotional standpoint, even from a financial standpoint, international students for these colleges are a very big source of revenue, right? Especially because most US citizens a lot of US citizens get financial aid. So even taking out the emotional aspect, even from a financial aspect, international students are critical. And I do strongly believe they will continue to be very welcome on US campuses.
Yeah, so my question is about scholarships and financial aid. So, during application process, any scholarships or financial aid that you apply before and then you get in, is that the only things that you can get, or can you apply for more after you have gotten in or gotten accepted?
Yeah, that's a good question. So before we go into before versus after getting in, just to provide an overview of how scholarships typically work, for US citizens, most colleges are need blind. What that means is that the financial aid you require will not play a role in your application at all. Unfortunately, for international students, if you're requesting financial aid for the college due to financial reasons, that's not the case. That is a factor in your application. There are the option for merit-based scholarships. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, and this may have changed over the past few years, there are no merit-based scholarships within the Ivy League. But I do know that for other really good colleges in the US, there are oftentimes merit-based scholarships where you're able to get a concession based on your performance or your profile. So it's definitely worth doing research on the different universities you're looking to attend to understand what opportunities they have available to them. Post getting into college, you do have a few options. Now, there are companies in India, even when you're applying to colleges or post applying to colleges, that do actually run financial aid programs. So you're able to actually apply. I believe the Tatas, for example, run one. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but really doing research on these different universities and on these different programs that are available after having gotten into a college is going to be quite important. So I think just to summarize it, if you're a US citizen, colleges are need blind. If you are not a US citizen, the policies differ from school to school. My understanding is for the Ivy League that they are need aware. And secondly, if you're looking at merit-based scholarships, there are so many fantastic universities in the US who do offer merit-based scholarships. So again, definitely do research into that. And also do research into, India-based or US-based companies that provide scholarship grants, because there are many. They are definitely competitive. But again, that goes back to building a profile that gives someone reason to fight for you.
So one thing you spoke about was the networking that you do in university. So that's the main reason I want to go to university as well, is to network. So my only question is, when you're being interviewed or when you write your application, do you ever mention that your primary purpose of going to university is to network?
I wouldn't say that, Rudransh. And the primary reason for that is networking is a very important part of your college experience. Okay, but that can't be the only reason you go to college, right? At the end of the day, there is a huge difference even in the quality of classes that you have. and focusing on, making sure that you're going to academically excel at those schools is very important. I do think the value of an Ivy League education, well, networking is a very big part of it. That's not the be all end all. I was able to work, my freshman year, President Joe Biden actually, came for speeches at our university, for example. Or one of my professors, Angela Duckworth, is very well known in her field. So the quality of the classes that you get at an institution are equally important. And at the end of the day, when someone is interviewing you, they're trying to understand what you're going to bring to the university and what you're going to achieve, right? A conversation where you're talking about how networking will be important may result in them feeling like you're only coming to sort of be able to leverage their alumni network versus contribute to it. So just something to keep in mind. You don't want to seem like you're just there to get something out of the university. You want to seem like you're going to contribute a lot and that you're also going to take your classes seriously. So just something to keep in mind when you go for your interviews.
So a lot of kids in India are looking at doing transfers to US universities, at the end of first year. In my personal and professional experience as a college counselor, I find it very tough that kids from Indian universities, Indian citizens, not the US citizens, getting into US universities. Have you come across kids who did their first year, say at DU or Ashoka or any Bombay University, and could manage a transfer to a Ivy League later?
Especially at the undergrad level.
So I have personally not come across that at the undergrad level. I have come across that at the master's level. The reasoning for that is, firstly, I guess transfers are hard on two levels, right? Firstly, the Indian university process is typically more focused on grades and a very set list of courses versus the American university processes that are a bit more focused on a holistic education. So from a purely academic and curiosity-driven standpoint, that may be a bit of a difficult fit. The second thing is I have met, I've had friends who transferred from US universities to my school, for example. That transition has been difficult, and that's difficult for a few reasons, right? One of the things that I was really grateful about when I went to college is before university officially starts, they have a 1 week period where it's just the freshmen, the first year students on campus. Everybody is new and everybody is really figuring out, how things are working. And that's when you build your friends. Coming in second year is really tough, even if you've already lived in the US, because everybody kind of has their friends groups. You're the only new kid who's on the block. So moving, especially if you've never been to the US before or only been on vacation, moving to a brand new place where, everybody's kind of established, to me, it sounds really hard. I think what might be a better fit is perhaps doing semesters abroad. So I know, for example, Ashoka has really great tie-ups, or DU has really great tie-ups with universities in the US. Perhaps giving it a try before looking to transfer, or really building a strong profile in your undergrad at an Indian university so you can come to your master's might be a better fit. But again, I can't speak to that from personal experience. That's just my initial thoughts.
True that. Thank you so much.
Another question I have on my personal chat about the Harvard situation. It's an Ivy League. In a few words, let us know what is your take, because you are a student, younger person.
So I spoke about this a little more veiled. I made allusions to it earlier on this call, but I think we all know that currently Harvard has been asked to, not get any more international students, and even the existing international students are being allowed to transfer. As I'm sure you guys already know, there's already been an injunction on the same. Harvard has now pushed its own lawsuit for the same. And I believe all universities, not just Harvard, have mostly released statements reaffirming their support for international students. So like I said, at the end of the day, I've been on these campuses. They are perhaps the most liberal places I've been. Sometimes to the point where my mom, for example, is just like, these campuses are super, super liberal. Nobody's focused on padai, but that's not true. At Penn, at least, is really, good about padai and studies and stuff. But at the end of the day, these campuses are very liberal. And they've all shown a commitment to their international students, obviously on an emotional and prestige level. So many of Harvard's best alums come from outside of the United States of America. And there is a lot of pressure right now, even from those alums on the university, to ensure that their international students are represented fairly. Harvard has released its own statement in support. Even my alma mater, right, the University of Pennsylvania, has released its own support. I would be very surprised should international students stop coming to any of these universities, given they're so integral, not just to campus culture, but like I mentioned, financial and, financial reasons as well, right? These are a huge source of income for these colleges. So for me personally, I would not be too worried about the economic situation. The political situation, what I will say is it's careful on how, make sure that you are smart about what you're saying. So for example, if you know there's a very sensitive political topic, I personally would not advise you to be writing about it in a newsletter or participating in protests related to it. It's careful. You need to be careful about, ensuring that you're not sticking out too much. But just from an international student standpoint, being on campus, you're very welcome. You're very encouraged to share your own cultural experiences. I would just be careful about getting involved in the protests or anything else that could perhaps call negative attention to you. Not just because of, what could happen to you at university, but there are also greater implications on your career. I think it's best to just be cautious in those senses. But otherwise, I genuinely really loved my experience. I think I've learned so much from it. And I think that should you all choose to apply to US colleges, it would be a fantastic experience for you.
Related to Kanika's question is also Anubha's question. I just read it out. She's
this.
talking about racism. It's almost, you could answer both in a go.
Yeah, so what I will reiterate again for Anubha's benefit before we move on to Kanika Auntie's question is US colleges are genuinely, in my opinion, one of the most liberal places I've ever been to. So on the actual campus itself, I have never had an experience where a faculty member or another student has spoken to me in a way that's derogatory or racist in any way, shape, or form. These universities are very, very good about, even if someone has said something that's untoward, if you file a complaint, that's taken very seriously. And that's another reason that one needs to be very careful on these campuses. If you, for example, say something that's racist or something rude to someone else and they put a case against you in the Office of Student Conduct, there's a risk that that goes on your record, or you're suspended or you're removed from the university entirely. So for me and my friends who studied in the US and then moved to India, I cannot speak about anybody from the university having been racist. Now, of course, if you decide to go on vacation on spring break to another part of the US, sometimes you meet some characters who are not great, right? But I don't think that's specific to the United States. It's like, even if I were to travel in Delhi, sometimes you meet someone who's really, rude and arrogant. So that's something to just keep in mind. But I will say on the campus itself, there's no racism. And frankly, it's one of the safest places I felt, regardless of India and the US, college campuses are where I feel safest. Now, moving on to Kanika Auntie's question, what I can confidently say is that I studied at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. I go back very often. I mentor kids who are currently at the University of Pennsylvania and other universities. In my own experience, I have never heard of someone being deported from the United States unless they've done something very serious, like, for example, underage driving or driving under the influence, or if they have presented as of late political views that go against certain sentiments with the ruling government. So I think, understanding that rules need to be taken very seriously. Like, I'll give you an example. At another Ivy League university, an Indian student, I believe 7 or 8 years ago, tried to bribe a cop when he got pulled over at a red light. You should not be doing things like that. Reading up on the laws and ensuring that you take them seriously is very important. Underage drinking is taken very seriously, especially for international students. Being responsible is important. And secondly, like I said earlier, I would be careful about posting or joining protests for any politically charged activities right now. But that being said, again, the US universities are very supportive. My sister actually was studying at Tufts. She graduated this year. There was someone arrested on that campus due to portraying her own political views. The university at the end of the day stood with her, but I would still not advise, getting to a position where you're posting or being active about protests that are a bit politically charged. So exercising awareness and being smart about what you're involved in is important. But that being said, I have so many friends who study in the US, family friends who study in the US. I haven't heard of anyone getting deported unless they did something very, very serious. And in my opinion, I have friends who've studied in the UK and other places. Compared to those places, I actually argue that the US is far less racist, especially on college campuses. These concerns are taken very seriously. Last but not least, I'm just going to tie it out by saying that all of these campuses will even throw cultural events, right? So UPenn is known for its holy event every year. There's a puja that happens every year for Diwali. For Eid, there are events that happen. So again, there's a huge commitment from the university to be diverse and to share in other cultures. So for example, even for Diwali, so many of our non-Hindu professors would join just to understand a bit more about the holiday. Or I would have the opportunity to visit a lot of other cultural activities. So there is a huge emphasis on cultural diversity. So I would not be concerned about racism, especially at these bigger universities.
Your effusive, charming self, as always. And best of luck to you for your career ahead. Keep guiding, keep mentoring, and thank you for having us over, joining in, and acceding to my request to do this. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And thanks to everyone else for joining and giving your time on a Saturday. I know this is the long weekend, especially in the US, whoever has joined from the US. So thank you for coming, because yes, long weekend, people just start vacationing on Friday. And to you, Diya, like in spite of having this, your sister just graduating, you could have had a party at this time.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
As well, but you chose to, help others in this way. So thank you so much for that. And anything else, if anyone has questions?
Do give our regards to your dad. And
thank you, Katta and Geeti. Really good informative. Thank you, Diya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thanks to Shreya for conducting this. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shreya. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.